Okay, it says we're live. Let me just double check that we're live on the other side because there's always a bit of lag. It always is slightly delayed. No, that's quite the delay. We're still not live yet. Okay, here we go. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my regular Wednesday night live. It is Wednesday night for me, but it is not Wednesday night for the beautiful Melissa Ohden. Tell them what time I made you wake up for this live stream.
Well, it's 5:30 my time here in America, and my body woke myself up about 4:30, so it's okay.
Okay, good. It's hard to get guests international because oftentimes they're like, oh no, I can't do that, which is fair. So it's like every now and then I'll have to do a pre-recorded, but I really appreciate you coming on. It's extremely lovely of you, and your story is just incredible, and people don't believe that there's such a thing as an abortion attempt survivor. And that's exactly what you are, and you're here by the grace of God, I would say.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think some people in Australia know this about me. Australia is one of my favorite places. I mean, it is for most people, right? But I went to Australia in about 2010, pretty early on in my activism, and went back a second time. And honestly, if I had my way, I probably would still be traveling back and forth between Australia and here. But that's a tough haul.
It's a lot of hours on an airplane, isn't it? Well, before we begin, I want to maintain the tradition of opening every live stream with a Bible verse. So this one is Revelation chapter 21. It's 4 to 7. I don't know if I'll read all of them. But and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Then he who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said to me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give of the fountain of water of life freely to him who thirsts. He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. So I hope that's a good way to start. I want to begin, first of all, just with the beginning. You were born into this world like any other, except for the fact that you were not wanted, but it wasn't by your biological mother. Do you want to sort of just state what happened?
Yeah, it's been a long process for me. Every survivor's story and experience is different. And in my case, it was my maternal grandmother who was responsible for forcing an abortion upon my birth mother. And I think, that's an important thing to talk about, right? Because whether you're in Australia or the US or somewhere else around the world, people will say abortion is a woman's right. It's her choice. And what we don't talk about is how so many women are forced or coerced or simply don't know that there are any other options in this world. And we know that that was the case for my birth mother. She was 19. She should have been able to make a decision freely about her pregnancy, but my grandmother was a prominent nurse in their community and, knew how to bypass hospital regulations and procedures. And so with the help of the local abortionist who was her colleague, they forced the abortion upon my birth mother when they found out that she was pregnant with me. And that type of procedure was the saline infusion abortion. It's not a procedure performed routinely anymore.
No, it's the 70s thing, I think.
Right. Well, and honestly, the reason why they stopped performing it is because too many of us lived. If people go through the research, it talks about that there were too many live births after the saline infusion abortion. And so what happened for me was they injected this toxic salt solution into the amniotic fluid surrounding me in the womb. And the intent of that toxic salt solution was to poison and scald me to death. So, typically it lasted about 3 days. The child would soak in that toxic salt solution, their life would be ended, and then they would induce labor with the intent that the deceased child would be delivered. We actually know through my medical records that I didn't soak in that toxic salt solution for 3 days. I actually soaked in it for 5.
Oh, wow, don't say that. Oh, no, you
They
poor thing.
tried time and time again over that 5-day period to induce my birth mother's labor, and it just wasn't successful. I was not being expelled from the womb. So here I soaked in that for even longer.
You are a survivor.
Well, I always tell my husband, like, if he, he better check twice, see if he ever thinks, right? Exactly. Yeah. I'm not going out easily.
Wow.
All kidding aside, they certainly believed that the abortion had been successful after that long. So when they finally induced her labor the 5th day, I was delivered at a hospital. That's where most late-term abortions take place. Over here.
To this day?
Yeah, still to this day. Again, this is one of those things we don't talk about, right? Most late-term abortions take place in hospital settings, not because they want to save a baby.
No, obviously not.
Because of the greater risk to women's health the later in a pregnancy that an abortion occurs. So at least that's the case in most places. It is here in the United States. We do have a few abortion clinics that kind of specialize in late-term abortions, but by and large, most do happen in that hospital setting. And so, for me, I was actually very blessed because when I was delivered alive, there was at least medical care right there down the hallway for me. But I wasn't given that medical care right away. That was not the plan for me.
No. So why did they save you? Because sometimes they just throw the baby in a bucket or they just stab them at the back of the neck. I've seen a full-term abortion. I've seen what they do. It's horrible.
Yeah. And I know that at that hospital, it was common, and I get teary about it too, right? At that hospital, it was common for children who survived, and particularly that procedure back then, they had a closet where they had buckets of formaldehyde and they would place that living baby in the bucket. And again, we live in a culture that says, no, that is fake news, right? We don't do that.
But they do.
They do. And I know that because nurses told me about it. A nurse who did it because she felt like she needed to apologize to me for what she did.
Yeah. And I'm sorry. I don't actually cry often. I thought I had conditioned myself out of it because I'm so used to seeing horrible imagery.
Yeah.
But then talking to you, knowing you survived, I think that got me. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. And that's what I want. I want the world to be able to just hear a story like mine for what it is, right? Instead of like trying to just immediately shut me up or tune me out, right? And go, no, just listen.
Yeah.
Just listen.
Well, okay, so in the case of Gianna Jessen, who is another abortion survivor, pretty well known as well, I'm also relatively familiar with her story. With her story, the abortionist actually had to sign her birth certificate, which she thinks is hilarious irony. She's like, he had to sign my birth certificate. In your case, what was it? Like, who signed the birth certificate? Because obviously the intention is to kill you. But you're not supposed to be alive right now, but you are. That's the intention. So who signs the birth certificate? Who saves you? I don't why?
Yeah, my story is an interesting one again to that point.
Yes, tell me.
I've never seen my original birth certificate because but I do have my medical records. Most abortion survivors don't have any detailed medical records about what they survived. And it doesn't mean it didn't happen. What it means is we have medical systems that don't want to document circumstances like ours, right? So most abortion survivors hear their stories passed along through their biological parents who raised them after the abortion fails, or
Oh,
their adoptive parents. Yeah, it happens a lot, actually.
I didn't know that. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna have a
So
talk on that in a minute. Keep going.
biological parents who did it, right, and live with that knowledge, share the story, or
Yeah.
Adoptive parents who are told when they adopt that child. Sometimes it's in the adoption record. So these stories tend to get passed along that way, but every once in a while we find medical records. That's part of the work that I do with survivors, is help them try to
Yeah.
obtain their records. And not just for the sake of activism, but like it is it's such a difficult place for survivors to be, right? To be told their story and not have any record of it, and to be doubted and told you're a liar and you're a myth and these things don't happen. It weighs really heavily. So I have my medical records, and in my medical records, we can tell that I was left for a period of time without medical care. APGAR scores are what people are scored on when they're first born, that tells, the doctors how the child is doing. And I was like a 6 when I was first delivered, which is not horrible, but not great for somebody like me. And after 5 minutes, I was almost dead.
Oh.
And what we now know, because it's taken me most of my life to piece together my story, I now know that my grandmother was monitoring that abortion procedure in the hospital. And
she's the one that wanted you dead, or at least gone from the picture.
She wanted the nurses to leave me to die. My biological family has shared that with me now, because she was very honest with them about how angry she was that day, and probably for many days after that, about the fact that I had survived. And I had a nurse contact me about 3 years ago now, who was working at the hospital that day. And she had found me through my public work. And she said, I was working at the hospital that day when you were born alive. She was working in the neonatal intensive care unit. And she said, I will never forget it. This tall blonde nurse rushed you in, made it clear she was unwilling to just leave you there to die. And so that's how I was provided medical care, because someone was willing to do the right thing for me that day. And I think that's what we're all called to do, right? Just do the right thing.
Yeah, well, I think the position that we are in, and I say we, and I shouldn't really include myself because I've not done anything incredible with my life. You were born in an incredible situation and you have this amazing voice. But I like to think I'm helping in some way, because thank you. I think these things are important. And so this is why, without making it about myself, I want to step away from talking specifically about politics, which I love, and talking more about issues. Because issues, this is an issue. It's not just about abortion anymore. It's about the fact that you survived an abortion. Like that's not a phrase that should exist. Oh, I survived an abortion attempt. Like, that's not a good sentence. Like, that's so important.
Yeah, well, and it's tough.
And so
my goal is that this doesn't happen, right? Like, nobody should ever have to live with the fact that they're an abortion survivor. But the reality is, is we're still blessed to be alive, right? Because we know statistically, many more children don't survive.
No, well, yeah, it's not just the United States and Australia. Like, this happens in so many different countries, and we probably don't even scratch the surface. Who knows how many babies have been murdered, is the best way to put it, since abortion became a thing. Like, I'm sure it existed before we had technology. I'm sure it probably, maybe even in its own way, existed in the time of Christ. I don't know. But between the corporations and Planned Parenthood and all of that, oh my gosh, I dread to think what the number is. And the only thing that gives me happiness about it is knowing that they automatically go to heaven. Like, the Bible says babies automatically go to heaven. So that's the only thing that brings me some level of peace about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think one of the things I appreciate about Australia is that you, as a country, at least are tracking. Again, we're scratching the surface, right? But you do have some numbers that are reported out through your government about the number of children that survive abortions.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. You're teaching me.
I'll send you some links.
Please do. I'm actually going to work on an abortion documentary once the whole COVID crap is done.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to start working on it last year, but I got lazy, and now I'm like, oh, I've got to do it. So yeah, that's going to be my little venture, an abortion documentary.
Some of the very first statistics I saw reported out about survivors actually came out of Australia. So it's Australia, Canada, and you tend to see some numbers reported from the UK. The United States does a terrible job. We don't even track the number of completed abortions on an annual basis because there are some states like California, which of course are a huge amount of the overall abortions performed. They aren't even reported. And so, you know, interestingly enough, when we talk about abortion survivor reporting, and that was kind of a big thing in 2019, especially in the United States, because they wanted to say that this doesn't happen and we don't need to have laws that protect children like me after they survive. What we find in the United States is we only have 8 states that report out their statistics on the number of children who survive abortions. And then even after that, and it's a fairly decent number, I think there were 25 children in those 8 states in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
We still have people in high places, right? You know, our government saying children don't survive abortions.
Hello.
There's the report. If you don't want to listen to me, if you don't want to believe my medical records, or, you know, sometimes what happens is I'm dismissed. They'll kind of do the, you know, pat her on the head. Isn't she so cute? There's like one of her.
Oh my gosh.
No, no, there's not just one of me. I think it makes them feel better somehow to think that there's just one of me, that this is like my personal crusade for myself.
No, I didn't even see it that way. That's ridiculous. That's what they do because it sounds like a fantasy to them. I should have made clear at the start, guys, I don't actually take questions. I take them at the very end, the last 15 or 20 minutes of the interview. So because you've paid and it will disappear, I am going to put the question up, but please don't ask questions until the very end. I will indicate to you guys when to ask questions, but I will put these ones up because they've paid and it will disappear and I won't see it soon. The Aspie MGTOW, there is lots of male hatred embedded in abortion too. I saw a woman post pregnant again, waiting to see if it's a boy, if it's a girl or an abortion. Dear God, what an idiot. And then why does Dante's Inferno place non-baptized in the first circle of hell? Limbo. I don't know. I can't answer that question because I didn't write that book or I'm not even sure what you're talking about. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. I mean, I was a literature major way back when, so I've read Dante's Inferno, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know what that is, so I can't comment on it. But people write things because they want to say what they want to say. But babies go to heaven. The Bible, I don't know where in the Bible it says it, but I know it does. Something to that effect.
Well, but I think the question or the comment too about the hatred is really,
yeah, that was a good comment.
Really important to talk about. And not only is it men that can be responsible for that, but I think we need to have an honest discussion in our world about the role that influential women play in an abortion taking place. I hear it so often. You know, people will come up to me after I've spoken somewhere and say, you know what, Melissa, it was my mom, it was my grandmother, it was my aunt, it was my sister who was responsible for telling me I had to have that abortion, right? Taking me there, paying for it, telling me to never talk about it. And it doesn't mean that those women are horrible people. I'm a firm believer that a lot of people have good intentions. Yeah. And their good intentions are incredibly misguided and unfortunately can cause death. I mean, that was the same in my case, right? My grandmother was a very interesting woman, to say the least. Did
you ever meet her?
You know what? I didn't. So she passed away about 9 years ago, I think.
Okay.
It's really difficult for my biological mother because I don't have memory of her. I don't have memory of things that she was responsible for. I've forgiven my grandmother and that abortionist. I could not be who I am. I couldn't do what I do if I didn't forgive them.
Forgiveness is important.
But my birth mother is not able to do that yet. She has too much baggage with it. Does that make sense?
So it does make sense. I wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier, and I said we'll touch on that in a moment. What was that? Remember? You said, well, basically, it was. I think it was about. I can't remember now. It'll come back to me. But I do want to know about your family. So, it was about other. So every abortion attempt, oftentimes the mother ends up keeping that child. Is that correct?
Oh yeah.
That's what we were talking about. Yeah. So I didn't know that. That's an interesting story. So how do you know that? Do you know another abortion attempt survivor who ended up being raised by her parents? Is that how you came?
I know lots of abortion survivors. So through the Abortion Survivors Network, that's the organization that I run. People can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, right, Instagram, all of those places. We have served now 324 as of yesterday, 324 abortion survivors from around the world. 13 countries are represented in that number. Those survivors range in age from infants right now. So children are still surviving abortions today. People in their 80s who survived illegal abortions, at-home attempts. That's pretty frequent. And that's a difficult conversation, right? Because I hear people say, well, we need to have legalized abortion because we don't want women to, be using coat hangers. None of us thought that. But
no, that is such a retarded argument. Don't go out and use a coat hanger. Like, don't get one. Like, don't kill yourself and your baby.
And here's the sad thing. I have survivors in our network who survived coat hanger abortions.
Oh. And are they missing an arm?
Some have had some like internal issues, right? I mean, just things that have happened. But so we have some survivors who survived back alley abortions and have not even scratches, but cut marks all over their back from the abortionist slicing in the womb. We have some survivors who survived dismemberment abortions. Again, we live in a society that wants to say that doesn't happen. Well, guess what? It does. And
Absolutely.
There's medical records of it. And doctors have looked over those survivors and said that missing limb is indicative of dismemberment. And somehow in the womb, the body has been able to stop itself from bleeding out, right? Long enough to then survive and go on to be born. It's a miracle.
It's it is a miracle, but it's just disgusting that it even exists. It's really funny because oftentimes people talk about racial topics, and I'm someone who talks about racial topics as well. I don't keep it just about abortion on my channel. I have lots of topics, but it's funny because people are like, oh, well, people from Africa are very savage, and, Native Americans, do this and that. And, there's some truth to certain elements of that. But in the world, the Western world, we're not doing that much different to what the New Guinea or the natives of Brazil do, where they bury their babies in dirt or they throw a child. Like, it's not like you can compare and say how savage other societies are, but we're pretty damn savage. Like
we're not as civilized as what we think we are, right?
Yeah. And I didn't mean to make it about race. I just couldn't help. The parallel just popped in my head. I had to say it. But yeah, it's just bad. Like I saw.
And the inconsistencies, right? We live in a world that would say, our world would say, first of all, listen to victims, right? That was a big thing in 2019. That's kind of a hot topic thing to bring up. But when we say listen to victims or listen to women's stories, and then as a woman, I share my story, people are going, no, don't listen to her.
Yeah.
Why?
Believe all women except Melissa Ohden.
Yeah. So because my experience doesn't fit the predominant narrative of abortion, then I need to just sit down and shut up. Come on.
I agree. It's retarded. My Port Film says abortion is murder. Thank you, Melissa, for your work. I put that up because it wasn't a question, so I thought it'd be nice. I wanted to ask you about your family, your birth family. So I know you were raised, you ended up having 2 adopted brothers. Is that correct?
I have an older adopted sister and 1 little brother. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so sorry. And on your father's side and on your mother's side, biologically, do you have half siblings?
I do, on both sides. So on my biological side, my biological father's side of the family, I have 1 half sister who is in law school right now. I have never met her. I don't know that I ever will. It's complicated because my birth father passed away before I ever met him. And so
but they don't know you exist.
They didn't.
They didn't.
They didn't. Because my birth mother also didn't know that I was alive for over 30 years.
Oh.
I did not find that out until, oh gosh, about 5 years ago. I got to think. No, about 7 years ago. My birth mother's family, I had found out who she was and who my birth father was back in 2007 through my medical records. And then my birth father passed away in 2008. And I had a little bit of correspondence with my birth mother's family, but I couldn't find her. And so they exchanged pictures and told me some things about her, but really made it clear that they wouldn't be passing along my messages to her because they quite simply did not communicate with one another. And now I know why. It's because they forced that abortion and then they kept my survival a secret.
But you have met her since.
I have, yeah.
Tell me how that happened. Tell me. I love these stories. I love those Find My Family type things. Like,
right. I still haven't watched that show. I'm afraid that
it's a good show. It makes you cry. It's a good cry. It's not a bad cry. Like, oh my God, babies are being murdered.
That's what I should be doing in quarantine, probably, is watching that show. But yeah, so my birth mother didn't know for over 30 years that I had survived. She was told the abortion had been successful, that I had died. And what, of course, they didn't say is that I was alive, and they had made sure that my rights were signed over without her finding out. And so we believe my grandmother was behind that. Again, the nurse who contacted me a few years ago was able to share that my grandmother was right there when I was taken to the NICU, followed that other nurse in, and actually threatened the nurses that day in the NICU and said, "Don't you ever tell my daughter that this baby survived."
Oh,
so they knew. I mean, lots of people knew, but my birth mother found out because I was public with my story, which, you know, I tried to prevent from happening, but her family just wouldn't communicate with her. And so we started communicating back in 2013, emails, letters. I sent her pictures trying to kind of recreate what she lost out on. And we spent about 3 years communicating before we met face to face for the first time.
What was that like? Was it at a coffee shop? Was it at a park? Were you on one side of the room? He was in the other.
It was a bit very much like, you know, picturesque movie, right? We met at a zoo. I know, it sounds so
random.
I know, but there were a couple of reasons for that. First of all, you know, we've tried really hard to create some sense of normalcy because this is so not normal.
Yeah.
And it's safer, I think, emotionally to some extent to meet in a public place, right? Instead of like just sitting down together and thinking, okay, now what? So we can do things, right? So we met at the zoo, and it was my birth mother and one of my half sisters. So I have 2 half sisters on that side of my biological family.
Okay, cool.
My birth mother, my half sister, and her 2 children. And then I had our oldest daughter. I have 2 girls, 12 and 5. I had our oldest daughter with me at the time. And so it was amazing. It's almost indescribable. I was nervous, scared to death, even though we had spent so much time communicating, and I knew that she loved me and that I love her. But there is just this fear, right? I think of being rejected. I don't know.
Rejection is what every human being hates at some level.
It is. And
Yeah.
and it's a very surreal situation, right? Because I look at her and I know that what she went through was horrible. So
Of
horrible.
course.
And so to see the pain in her eyes, I still get choked up about that because nobody should have to go through what she has. And so
No.
she has had to see my pain and I've had to see hers. And I think we live in a world that would much rather just turn a blind eye to other people's pain.
Well, okay. So she obviously, sure, she had sex with your dad and you were the result of that. Why, what, see, the thing with this is that this is painted a lot on TV shows and stuff like that as the overly religious parent trying to hide the problem. But in my mind, a true believer in Christ, a true person of faith, would keep the child. But usually it's like, no, you have to get rid of the baby. So your grandmother chose that option. And so why didn't what did your father's family not know about you at all?
No, they didn't.
You said that already. But they were a couple, right? So,
They
or were they not a couple? They weren't.
Well, they were a couple at the time. So I now know that they were. Sorry, this hearing's been bothering me. This I was like looking at it going, come on, just flip. My biological parents were engaged. They planned to marry. And yep, that earring's just not going to do it. They were engaged. They planned to marry and had dated for about 4 years before they became pregnant with me. And for a number of reasons, my maternal grandparents did not like my biological father. And did not want them to marry. And so when the abortion was forced on my birth mother, I mean, my maternal grandmother had gotten my birth parents together, screamed at them and said, essentially, right, you guys have screwed up. I'm going to take care of this. It is done. This is what's going to happen. And 4 days later, that forced abortion took place. And my biological parents never saw each other again. They talked one time on the phone. And that was mainly because my grandparents made my birth mother sell the engagement ring to help pay for the abortion.
Wow, what a story. Well, and so what is your relationship with your adoptive family? Like, are they sad or are they excited that you've gotten to know this biological part of your family? Because there's always a threat there at times.
There has been over the years. That was difficult for them because they knew they wanted to protect me. They wanted to protect me from the truth. They wanted to protect me from being hurt by my biological family. And, I think as any parent, they were fearful for me for many, many reasons. And I think for my mom in particular, right, there's something about moms where you're afraid of somehow being replaced. And I hear about that a lot in biological and adoptive families that, people are afraid that somehow they're just going to automatically move on. And that's just not the case predominantly. And so, I think there was one time early on in this process of searching for my birth parents that my mom cried and said, I just don't want you to replace me. And I just had to remind her and say, Mom, you are always my mom. You know that. And so that never has changed. My mom and dad are my mom and dad. And now I also have my biological family in my life. My adoptive parents have not met my birth mother yet, just from a scheduling issue.
Oh, okay, interesting.
But they pass along messages through me all the time. My birth mother really respects my mom and dad very much. And I love that about her. She'd be the first person to say, I am not her mother. I'm her biological mother. She has a mother. And in my birth mother's opinion, this is the way it was supposed to be. Because there's times where I'll say, I'm so sorry, right, that you weren't able to raise me. I'm so sorry that I was placed for adoption behind your back. And, she'll say that you're better off that way. You shouldn't have been raised in our biological family. You never would have been accepted by them. She really believes I would have been rejected and targeted by my biological grandmother for my entire life. So I can appreciate that.
And how close are you to your mum and dad who raised you? Like, do you just, because obviously you've known your whole life that you were adopted, but like is that love just never ending? Is it just like any other parent-child relationship?
Oh yeah, I'm their favorite.
Girl. Well,
my
you have
siblings would say that. So, yeah, they would say that. It's just amazing. My mom and dad have been the greatest supports in my life, have supported me on every step of this journey. And it's not easy. It's not easy to walk through this process privately. And then for me to do it publicly and be, involved in activism, and for my parents to have to read horrible, stupid comments that people make sometimes, right? Like, that's what I always try to remind people is.
I agree. Ignore the comments. Some people are just nasty.
And they're busy saying things like that. Every single person is someone's child, grandchild, somebody's sibling. Can we just show each other some respect?
I agree. I completely agree with that. That's very fair, very true. Okay, so I read somewhere that you're a Catholic convert. So that means that you are a Catholic now, or how recent was that? And why Catholicism? Why don't you step into the good zone and come to Protestantism?
Oh boy.
I'm joking. I don't want to offend you
this morning for this conversation.
I'm a bitch. I'm sorry.
One of the things I love about all of you in Australia is, I think people tend to think that those of us from the United States are just so bold, but I find people from Australia to just be like on it.
I think it's just me, because a lot of people say that I have no filter. This has been a common occurrence since I was 4 years old. No filter. Dia has no filter, and I'm like, well, why don't I do a talk show and talk to people about and just say what I want? And if the guest gets annoyed, they get annoyed. But most of my guests have been great.
It just means it was meant to be for you, right? You're using your gifts.
Yeah, no. I was just a cow. But so why? So I know from the things that I've seen, all your little biographies, that you and I hope you don't mind me saying, you were a little bit promiscuous for a time. You sort of lost your way. But then you found God, but through Catholicism, which is what I find unusual, which you probably find odd that I find that odd. But I do find I do find that odd. But what was it about Catholicism, or what was it about Christ, or what was the moment? What was that moment? Because most Christians have a moment. I don't have a moment. I was raised in it, but some people who were suffering and were sinning a lot or whatever, I mean, I still sin, of course, but like, have a moment. Do you have that testimony?
Well, for me, part of it is a process. So I was raised in a very, faith-filled home. We went to church regularly, right? The church was really our family. Knew Jesus from my youngest age. My parents really set that stage for me to be a forgiving and loving person, which I'm incredibly grateful for. But I, like so many people, when I found out my story, I was in such a painful place, and again stumbled. So that's when I was trying to find love in every wrong way, and struggled with alcohol abuse and an eating disorder. And
that's really, right.
It was that outward manifestation of my own pain. And so many people go through that. And I wanted to run away from God. I really did at that time, but that was mainly because of my own sin, right? I was thinking, could you just get away from me right now?
You were like Jonah.
Right? Like, put some space here. And I was like 14, right? So in my 14-year-old mind, so I'm thinking, get out of here. And I couldn't get away. I I couldn't get away.
Where did this come from? Sorry to interrupt. What did this come from? Why were you trying to hide from God? Did you find out at 14 that you were the product of an okay. So sorry, that adds context for everyone watching. So at 14, you discover this horrible fact about your life, and then you go off the rails, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. And nobody knew, right? I am historically, I was a people pleasing, don't rock the boat, make things easier for everyone, right?
That's me.
That's right. Don't make things hard for people, right? If you are feeling horrible, Melissa, you better just keep it to yourself, because nobody else needs to worry about you right now. And so I imploded. And for me, I think that there were two turning points early on. The first one was knowing that God knew. Because here I am keeping these secrets, and the secrets just pile on, right? So secret 1, I survived an abortion. Secret 2, this hurts so horribly. Secret 3, oh, by the way, like, I'm struggling in all these ways and I'm not going to tell anybody. So like pile after pile after pile.
Wow.
And knowing that God knew brought me so much solace.
Solace. Okay.
And after a little while, right? Initially it was like, run away, try to run away. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my goodness, God knows all along. God knows who I am. He's known all along my story. He knows what I'm doing right now. Why am I trying to run away? It's not doing any good. So I think that was step 1. And then the other huge piece of that, though, was having to forgive my biological parents. And so I first forgave them when I was a teenager. And I say first time because for me, I don't ever get to be done forgiving. This is not like a destination where I finally arrive.
That's a good point.
I think most people want to arrive, don't we?
Yeah, I've forgiven people in the past, and then I feel like, why did I forgive them as well? Like, so for you, it's still ongoing. You've forgiven your mom, you've forgiven your dad, even your grandmother, but you haven't just parked your car at that destination. It's still ongoing.
Exactly. And I think when we recognize that,
you're a wise lady.
Well, I have my moments. For me, part of it is knowing that things continue to happen in your life.
Yeah.
That disclose something about them, or even when my children were born, here I was holding my little vulnerable newborn babies and looking at them thinking, oh my goodness, you never would have lived if that abortion would have been successful.
Yeah, exactly.
Every old emotion comes back up and you're going, ugh. And then you take a deep breath and say, okay, and I choose to forgive you once again, knowing that.
No, exactly. That's really good. I think that makes perfect sense. And I was curious about something. In your, I hope you don't mind me asking this. In your, I don't think you will, but I feel horrible asking it. Sorry, I'm struggling to say it. In your promiscuity, did you ever get pregnant?
No.
No. Okay. All right. Cool. Done.
Dear, nobody's ever asked me that before.
Really? I'm so sorry. I told you.
I mean, use it and run with it. Be like the first person who ever asked Melissa Ohden if she had gotten pregnant.
Well, considering the topic we're talking about, I was watching, this is what shocked me. This is what made me really, I was watching this with my mom about 6, 7, 8 months ago. My mom and I were watching a story. It was Gianna Jessen at like 16 with her biological mother on a stage. And then there was another lady there with her daughter. And this lady had her daughter, and her daughter, she's like, I'm against abortion. I now know what it is. And then the daughter's like, I survived the abortion. And but then the mother had actually, after this abortion attempt with the daughter she actually ended up having, had 2 more abortions after her. So the only reason I asked it was because without being rude to anyone, people are stupid. and they don't learn from their first lessons. I'm stupid too in that sense. As I said to you before, sometimes you need the brick wall 3 times until you get the lesson. Yeah. So, but like
that's say that sometimes too. Yeah. Well,
okay, yeah. We're all stupid at times, but like that. The only reason I asked that question was because I had remembered that, and I thought, well, maybe it's happened.
That must have been a video from like, yeah, that would be like the 90s. And I can guess, I think, who that abortion survivor was. They don't share their story anymore. There were a handful of survivors in the late 90s who did.
Oh, okay. So I probably know who I'm referring to. I forgot her name. I could send you the link after this.
It could have been Sarah Smith or.
So say the names again.
Sarah Smith.
What was the other one?
I can't think of the other young lady's name. I'll find it and send it to you.
Okay.
But that's, there were a number of survivors who shared their stories. And I think in both of those cases, so Gianna, who you probably saw her with, was her adoptive mom, but the other two ladies were raised by their biological mothers. And I think one of the things I found that people are probably surprised by is that I have survivors in our network who had abortions themselves before they found out that they had survived an abortion.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's sad, isn't it? There's a really good movie on this topic called what's it called? October Baby.
Mm-hmm. Have
you heard of that movie?
I have, actually. I helped with some of the education and information behind the just because, it was funny because about that time there was not a lot of statistics out there about survivors, and the producers of that film went to an event and I was there speaking, and as I'm talking they're kind of going, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And they came up to me later and they said, we did not know anything about you and your story when we made this film. And I said, it's okay, I believe you. But nobody else at the time really knew the information the way that I did. So I did help.
Right. It's funny too, because everyone talks about the movie Unplanned, and that's a great film. I love that movie. But before Unplanned, October Baby was the one that really got my heart. Like, I watched that and I was like, that's intense. Like, it was just intense.
Yeah, very much so.
Oh, that's funny that you were like a consultant for that film. That's good. Well, I wanted to ask you more questions. I'm just trying to put it all together in my head. But guys, if you want to ask questions, I will now take questions. It's the question portion now. I want to know. Okay, so you said that your birth father is Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you live in the United States. So, do you speak any Spanish?
I do, completely on accident. I had a minor in Spanish in college. Not knowing. Okay. I've been able to trill my R's really well since I was in high school. It didn't make any sense to anyone, but there's something there. So yes, I do speak enough Spanish to just get by. Oh,
well done. Have you ever been to Spain? I mean, I know you don't know yourself. You haven't. Oh, well, hopefully when this Corona stuff is over, you can go to Spain.
It's one of those things where I get asked to go a lot of places and I would love to go, but having 2 young children, I tend to stay focused in the United States as much as possible right now when my kids are still young. So my 12-year-old would love to travel everywhere with me.
Oh, that's lovely. All right, so we have some questions here. I don't know what this means. Do you understand this? What about Gosnell?
I do.
Okay.
So Kermit Gosnell was a pretty infamous abortionist here in the United States. So he was found guilty for killing children like me after they survived abortion. So in his practice, they would use scissors to stab and snip the spinal cord of children after they survived abortions. And if people haven't followed that, I think there's a few things that are pretty interesting about that. First of all, the only reason why that came to light was because there were some other issues in that practice, like his use of opioids or things like that, prescription drugs. It wasn't that they were wanting to catch an abortionist killing live children. That they probably wouldn't have touched that with a 10-foot pole, but it came out for other reasons. And then after it happened, there was really this media blackout. The courtrooms were empty. By and large, the media wasn't going to report this case. And I think we need to have an honest discussion to say, why is that? Because they don't want this to be brought out in the light. We're going to keep this predominant narrative that children don't survive, that abortion is a safe, legal, rare choice.
Yeah, they have their agenda.
Right. And so then the other thing I think that's important about Gosnell is we've seen lots of people say, well, he's such an outlier. Abortionists don't really do those things. He's not that far removed from other abortionists. We can't compartmentalize this and try to say that Gosnell is the only person who ever did these kind of things. I'll have a book coming out in probably 2021. I'll have an announcement about it soon, hopefully, but I'm working with a huge best-selling author. You guys are going to be pretty stoked when you find out who it is. But it will have 10 to 12 abortion survivor stories and some stories of nurses who intervened.
Send them my way. Send them my way. I'll interview them.
I'm so excited about this. I've wanted to do this for so long. And I think it's going to create a conversation that people have to have. That Gosnell is not alone, that Melissa is not alone as a survivor. So yeah, it's just time.
That's crazy. That's really, really insane. Okay, let's see. I'm happy you're doing that, by the way. I really want to get a crack on my little documentary, and that's just about Australia. My friend Benjamin wants to know, is Ohden a Scandinavian background? Any lasting scars from abortion? You're sneaking in 2 questions, Benjamin.
My kind of person. I'm not Scandinavian, so there's some Spanish blood and then Scottish, actually. Scottish and German from my birth mother's side of the family, and some German on my birth father's side of the family. In terms of
so Ohden is an adoptive, is your adoptive family, are they Scandinavian?
My Ohden is my married name, and actually it's German.
Oh. Okay. Oh, it's German. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know.
Although my husband doesn't look German, I don't know. My husband looks a lot like me. I don't know.
I don't think I look Latin. I think I look like Middle Eastern, or like a lot of people say I look Greek.
If people see my husband has dark hair and dark skin also, and dark eyes. Someone
was creeping in the family tree.
It is funny. Any lasting scars? Not physically for me. We were talking about this when the show was starting. But to give it a little bit of context, when I first survived, I weighed less than 3 pounds. I had severe respiratory liver problems. I suffered from seizures. The doctors actually thought I had a fatal heart defect because my body was under so much distress. And so they thought I would be suffering from disabilities throughout my lifetime. But overall, I am perfectly healthy. I have some immune system issues that pop up because of the stress that my body was put under in that abortion procedure.
I agree. Okay, hang on. Let me find a proper good question. Some people are asking silly questions. Let's have a look. I don't know if this is Literal Murder That Gosnell. Briefly read article. Was a film in America or a documentary? Was it a documentary or a film? I don't know. I want to watch that.
There was a book and there is a film. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I can't remember when it was released. Fairly recently. In the last couple of years.
Okay. You can read that if you want me to read it out.
The next question says, what percentage of Americans are against abortion, and what are the general feelings about the issue across the country? That's a great question. 2019 was a pretty pivotal time in the United States. We saw a lot of what we would say is aggressive abortion legislation being introduced. And so that's when you saw places like New York lighting up the towers pink to celebrate that they made abortion essentially legal through all 9 months of pregnancy. And if people caught some of the news in that, there was like both sides who would say, oh, they didn't open abortion through all 9 months, but yes, they did. And so we saw that aggressive abortion and them stripping away care of survivors in a lot of legislation. And what ended up happening then is they started polling a lot of Americans to say, where do you stand on the issue? And early on in that process, the numbers were polling much higher. So there was a time when about 51% of Americans were identifying themselves as being pro-life. And that was really one of the first times that we had seen that polling number be quite that high. I think the numbers went down a little bit after that, because once people start arguing publicly about legislation, I think people start to turn off their ears, right? They don't want to hear the political chatter. And
no, very few people love politics.
So what I would guesstimate is that we probably are in a dead heat in the United States, about a 50-50 split of people who would identify as pro-life versus pro-choice. But I think if you sit down and you talk to people and you would say, what does that mean to you when you say you're pro-choice? I find that many more people are pro-life, but they're pro-life with exceptions. So
yeah,
the rape, incest, life of the mother. So I think more people are pro.
And retardation.
Yes, disabilities in the case of the child.
Yeah. Sorry, that sounds nicer the way you just put it. But yeah. Here's a question by the Aspie MGTOW. On the show Orange is the New Black, a female inmate makes the argument that 20 years after Roe versus Wade was introduced, crime statistics dropped as a result of fewer delinquents. Response?
Well, I'm not a statistician to know that, but I would say our crime numbers have not gone down in the United States. And we hear that argument a lot, though, in terms of somehow that abortion solves the problem of child abuse, crime.
Yeah, let's murder them.
Foster care. I mean, all of these things, people will trot out that argument like somehow ending the life of another human being is the solution to a systemic problem. Is there any other situation where we would say it's okay to take someone's life to solve a problem?
Well, it depends.
What does it then?
Well, no, it depends. Like, what if it was like Stalin or Hitler? No.
Or my grandmother.
Well, yeah, that's insane that your grandmother.
But that wouldn't have been okay. She was
no,
right?
Sorry, I was trying to make light of a heavy topic.
I know.
Yeah. But no, it doesn't depend at all. I'm pro-life all the way. Actually, this is not a question that I had planned to ask you, but it's just now in my head. Okay, so Dennis Prager. Do you know Dennis Prager?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I like him very much. And one of his arguments is that he's pro-life, but he's also pro-capital punishment. And so some people are like, oh, well, then you're a hypocrite because there's a double standard. I don't know why the lefty sounds like Mickey Mouse, but anyway.
I do that. Drives my husband crazy. He'll always say, is that really what they sound like? Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, I'm a lefty. Yeah. But these lefties and even some people on the right, I interviewed Lana Lockteff, and I think she's fabulous and beautiful and all that kind of stuff. But she is for certain abortions, and that's fine. Like, she could be that. People are allowed to think what they want. But the point of my question is that what is your opinion on capital punishment, being that you're not supposed to be alive? And do you find it to be a hypocrisy? I don't find it to be a hypocrisy, because I would say one is innocent and one has done evil. But what are your thoughts on that?
As a Catholic, to add that little piece, right? Although certainly, even if I hadn't converted to Catholicism, I believe that my heart would be the way that it is, in the respect that I have what I would call a consistent life ethic. I do not support capital punishment.
Okay.
I believe that those individuals can spend their lifetime in prison, and that is a horrible sentence for them. I don't believe in the taking of any human life. And
so you really are pro-life, even for
I am consistently pro-life across the board like that. And
I was. but I'm slowly thinking some people just are so evil. Yes, read them the Bible or something, but like, yeah. Anyway, keep going.
Well, and for me, it got really interesting. Gianna and I, to talk about Gianna Justin, Gianna and I testified together in 2015 before Congress here in the United States. And we were testifying about why Planned Parenthood should be defunded.
Good.
Fantastic. And what ends up happening when you go before Congress like that, or you would go before Parliament, the people who believe what you believe tend to be the ones to ask you lots of questions. The people on the other side who don't want to hear your story, who support abortion, don't want to ask you anything.
I'm not surprised.
Right? You just hear crickets. And what ended up happening in that hearing is the one question a Democrat who supports abortion in the United States, the only question a Democrat asked our whole panel of pro-life witnesses was, do you support the death penalty? And all the other pro-life witnesses went down the line and said, I support the death penalty. I support the death penalty. And then they get to me and I say, I don't support the death penalty. And the Democrat in this hearing actually said, well, thank you for being consistent. And I winked at him in the middle of this hearing and I said, thank you. So it became a bit epic.
That's pretty epic. Yeah. Look, I'm on the fence on it at the moment because there is so much evil out there. So I don't really know, but it's not something I think about all the time. But I just thought I'd ask because I thought it was relevant to what we were discussing. Anita McGuire. By the time a baby can survive outside the womb, the mother can feel it moving around and identify its limbs. Well, it's not really a question. She just put a question mark at the end of it. Mm-hmm. Is that true, though?
Absolutely.
As someone who's had
So, well, and in the survivors that we have in the network, I can tell you a little bit. So most actually have survived late-term abortions. So it's pretty common for survivors to be surviving abortions that happen late, like 28-ish weeks upwards. We probably think I was about 31 weeks. That's what it says in my medical records. They thought my birth mother was about 20 weeks pregnant with me. But the fact that I weighed as much as I did and I was able to live tells us that she was probably more like 31 weeks.
Were you a chubby puppy?
Well, at 2 pounds, 14 ounces. Yeah, I was enormous. But so many survivors survive late-term abortions, but we do see children survive first trimester abortions. So whether the abortionist just clean misses the child in the womb, that does happen. It happens in the cases of twins. So they don't do ultrasound.
Mm-hmm.
They remove one baby, believe that the abortion has been successful, and then the woman progresses throughout the pregnancy, starts to feel movement.
October Baby.
Right.
October, yeah. Everyone watch October Baby.
We have a lot of survivors who are twins. And even in the cases of survivors who were believed to be a single baby surviving an abortion, there is some belief for some of those survivors that maybe they were a twin. And that's why the abortionists thought the abortion was successful.
Wow. That's okay. That's that's not a good story. That's an interesting thing to hear. Let's have a look. Okay, this isn't necessarily a question. Melissa, you look amazing.
Good lighting.
Yeah. No, you are very pretty. You have big lips and green eyes. That's what every woman wants. Here we go. Question, what percent? Oh, he asked the same question again in case I didn't. Okay, so let's have a look. What does Melissa think of the person of the paragraph she could think of? Okay, this is a good question. Raymond Foster. What does Melissa think? I think I've seen that guy before. Sorry. What does Melissa think is the best sentence or paragraph she could think of that would persuade young ladies to not get abortions? That's very good. Convince people not to get abortions. Go.
No matter what you're going through, abortion is not the solution. It's not. It is not the solution. Ending the life of another human being is never the solution. And I think the other important part is to ask them, what are you going through right now that someone can help you with? I think we're quick to say, and maybe we're not quick enough to ask, right? Tell me what you're going through right now. Tell me what you need so I can find a way to help you. Women need to know that there are people out here who care for them, that there are places they can go to get help. Most people know where to go to get an abortion. What most people don't know is where they can go to be supported. We fail women. And when we fail women, we fail children.
And you fail men because you deprive them of the opportunity to grow up, stop being, man children, and, take responsibility for being a father. And so we're slowly creating a society of men who will always be shit parents, mothers or women who know that, who will think that it's just a clump of cells, and babies' lives that are getting destroyed. It's a trifecta. It destroys everything. Yeah.
Well, and to think how abortion has enabled men to not take care of women, right? To sexual abuse, right? When we talk about the Me Too movement, think about how many times abortion was probably used to cover up some of those behaviors.
It's disgusting. Yeah. Sandy Turner, my friend, how do we get this abhorrent pro-abortion legislation around the world repealed? Great question. Do you just keep lobbying like Parliament and Congress, or what do you do?
They need to hear from us on a consistent basis. For me, I think that's been the hardest part about the stay-at-home orders and quarantine is that and understandably so, people's focus needed to be on what is happening and how to stay safe and healthy. But to some extent, what I've seen is that, at least in the United States, we still see legislation being introduced that is very aggressive in expanding abortion, and they're trying to slip it through. And so no matter if you're home or you're out there in the world, keep contacting members of parliament, legislators, whoever it is, to let them know where you stand on the issue and what you expect them to do. And then we have to vote in a way that shows them what we believe. That's hard, I think, sometimes, at least in the United States. I don't know if it's the same way in Australia, but we don't always tend to get out and vote the way that we need to.
No, I think that's true. And also there's a lot of misinformation or false information out there that makes people want to that makes people think that abortion is just abortion. It's not a big deal because it's just a clump of cells. It doesn't matter. It's not a big thing. And so that's always an issue in my head, because I'm thinking that we've been so conditioned now to believe a falsehood. It's not good.
Well, and that's where we all come in too, to educate people. Don't be afraid to have this conversation. We can speak about this and still have a respectful, honest conversation.
Yeah. This is Kenji. How do you properly and effectively prevent unwanted pregnancy and therefore lower the numbers of those wanting an abortion?
That's a hard question, because what we typically hear is that people support the use of birth control to bring down the number of abortions. But when you look at the statistics, what you will find is that birth control has not, at least in the United States, effectively reduced the number of abortions. Yes, our number of abortions completed annually is now a little under 1 million a year. But if you talk to women, what you'll find is that many women are on birth control when they still become pregnant, and then they have an abortion. So birth control is not the solution to that. What I do believe is a huge part of that is having resources and supports in our world that support women. I was so grateful, about 10 years ago, to come into contact with some people in Australia. Real Choices Australia was one of those organizations who really worked hard to educate people and make sure that there were places like pregnancy support centers starting to pop up to meet the needs of women, and to do so in a cost-effective way and really create a sense of community to come around people in a time of need. Do you know of your pregnancy centers?
I don't know, but that's part of why I wanted to make this documentary, because There is one here in Sydney. I forgot what it's called, but it helps young ladies, and they don't know that it's there. It's like just like a residential house or something like that. My friend Sophie York gave me all these details for this documentary that I was going to work on, but I haven't been able to follow it through.
Some contacts for you.
Yes, yeah, please. You might be able to help me with all of this. This would be great. But yeah, so my answer to that question is just, it's not that hard to not have sex. So just, freaking shove a cork in it and stop doing it. All right, let me have a look. I don't mean literally shove a cork in it. I just mean just stop doing it.
Again, it's the Australia thing.
Your face when I said it, I was like, I have to let her know what I meant by that. Have you met anyone who conceived through rape and whose mother considered an abortion but refused? I've seen several articles as such. Oh, I have an answer for this, but I know he's asking you, so you go first.
No, you go. You'll answer it.
Oh, okay. The Aspie MGTOW. On my channel, there is a woman who I interviewed who's actually acquainted with Melissa Ohden. Her name is Jennifer Christie. We're friendly on Facebook. But long story short, she was raped by a Native American man when she was like translating, because she's a translator for the deaf, and she was knocked out and she was meant to be dead, but she was raped, and she survived the rape. And it doesn't answer your question in that she never considered an abortion. That was never on her mind. But the baby is a source of light in her life, and she's extremely happy, and the husband loves this baby, and so that's a really good outcome. But she's being tormented now by the left, saying that she should have killed her baby. So there she gets sort of the opposite. But anyway, that's sort of my little story. You can catch that on my channel. But go ahead, Melissa. Do you know any other similar stories like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. There are more stories like that than there are of survivors. There's a great group out of the United States called Save the One. And they are full of stories like Jennifer's, of people who were either conceived in rape or incest, or they conceived a child out of rape or incest. And they've gone on to carry that child, and they carry that torch, so to speak, to remind people that every life has dignity and value, no matter the circumstances.
Would you?
Rebecca Kiesling, if you don't know Rebecca is a huge advocate out of the United States, and she runs Save the One. And I think one of the most powerful statements she makes is, don't call me the rapist child. She was conceived in rape, and she'll say, don't call me the rapist child, right? I'm a child of God. My biological mother who was raped doesn't want me to be called the rapist child. Why do we do that?
Yeah, well, that's what we do. Even I do that in my story when I said that Native American man did this. Like, why did I say that? I could have just said a man. Like, we do tend to do that. I suppose it's just out of habit. I don't think it's meant with maliciousness, though. Yeah. Over here, Anita McGuire. Even in the Middle Ages, a baby who died to save the mother's life in labor was permitted. So why is it now needed to legislate as abortion? Does that make sense to you or not?
It's too early to make sense to me.
Yeah, well,
I need more coffee. Sorry.
That's all right. It's 6:45 here now.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's saying that when you're in labor, so why is it now needed to legislate as abortion?
I think it just is probably put in a little bit differently. Maybe the question is, we get asked a lot, what about the life of the mother? And what I always tell people is, in the case when a woman's life is in danger during pregnancy, and you could read doctors say this all the time, you don't have to have an abortion to try to save the mother. You would.
No.
I mean, think about that. Why would you go ahead? If someone is dying, would you take the time to then facilitate an abortion? And potentially put their life in danger? Wouldn't you induce labor with the intent of trying to save both the woman and the child?
Exactly. Let's have a look. Do you think people who are pro-choice are either misled in terms of the abortion practice, or are some nefariously evil, or just don't believe in Christ? It's probably all three.
I was just gonna say, Dia's got this one. Trust me, I have met people where I can feel evil. I have touched the outside of abortion clinics.
Evil.
And you know it.
Did you know that? I believe you. Here in this country, we have things called exclusion zones, so we can't protest outside. Right. And not recently, about last year, there's a lady named Kathy Clubb. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
I recognize that name.
Yeah, and she purposely stood outside an abortion clinic, and I'm not sure what she did, whether she spoke to a woman and said, please don't do it, or whether she just sort of had a placard, I'm not sure. But the specific of it basically is that she's now considered a criminal for breaking a pathetic law. Yeah, and so we don't have the same freedoms that you guys have. You're very lucky.
Well, and I think whether it's Australia or the United States, I think what we tend to see is we see those people who don't believe in God or somehow, do worship to some extent abortion, right? It is seen as this right and this choice and something that they have to protect. And it ends up being something that they, tend to just then get so preoccupied. And I think it changes people, right? It clouds vision, it clouds judgment. I see people who otherwise wouldn't support something like that. And when we think about how many abortions have taken place around the world, it's easy to see how people become so impacted by it because somebody knows somebody who's had an abortion or they themselves. And I think to some extent, as human beings, we tend to self-protect. After it happens, we're going to protect those decisions we've made and somehow make it okay and right. And so then people take up that torch and they carry it. And they're going to fight to the death for that to be protected. Why? Because then maybe somehow it makes them feel better.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does to me. No, I think that makes perfect sense. Do you think, with another question, that there is ever a circumstance where abortion can be excused?
No.
Like, I'm referring to knowing for a fact that the baby's going to, I don't know, just something like people make the quality of life argument.
No.
No, I tend to agree, but
my youngest child was born with health issues that nobody ever suspected. It didn't come up in ultrasounds. My daughter had 3 surgeries by the time she was 3 months old, spent her first Christmas and New Year's in the hospital. In a horrible situation. I live as a mother, knowing that people would tell me that somehow I should have aborted my child. And if people see her, they don't see that there's anything different about her. She is the most energetic, beautiful, lively human being. But because she has some complex medical issues, we live in a world that somehow would cast judgment upon her and say that she's going to be a burden to society. And I will fight. I will fight every single day of my life for her and for children like her to be respected. I mean, how incredibly judgmental of a society to somehow decide whose life is worthy to live and who is going to be loved. How incredibly arrogant.
And that exists on both sides of the retarded left-right spectrum that I just wish didn't exist. It should just be right-wrong spectrum, not left-right spectrum. But they believe it on both sides that, if you have Down syndrome, you shouldn't be alive, abort them. And eugenics is a word that people bring up a lot. And there's good eugenics and many in the past have called me out for saying, oh, how can you be against eugenics? And I'm like, well, because it's killing off people. They're like, oh, well, it's not a bad thing. Eugenics simply means, putting an Olympic athlete with another Olympic athlete and having an Olympic athlete baby. And I'm like, okay, fine. If you consciously go out of your way to do that, then good for you. That's good eugenics, whatever. But what if that baby still had Down syndrome? Like there's still statistical anomalies, I suppose. Are you okay?
Oh, I'm fine. No, I'm listening.
Okay. And so to me, the argument to rid certain human beings, for me personally, I see that as a far right argument and a leftist argument. I do.
Oh, absolutely. I think if we were willing to have an honest look at ourselves on either side of that fence, so to speak, yeah, both sides are absolutely guilty of making those kind of determinations about people.
Yeah, and many on the far right again, and I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to bash anyone. I'm just bringing up things about the relevant topic. But they are like, oh well, I hate abortion. Abortion's wrong. But if it's a black person, awesome. And I hate that. Like it makes me mad. Like it makes me want to scratch my face. Because that's the reason abortion became a thing in America. Because Margaret Sanger wanted to rid the world of black people. And it's Planned Parenthood's doing a great job carrying the mantle of what she originally wanted. Absolutely. And the black neighborhoods are the ones who are the most affected by abortion. These mothers are killing their babies off, and these black fathers could be fathers, but they're not. Like this could make them better men. A child can make a human being a better person.
A great person for you to have on the show sometime, Adi, the United States, is a friend of mine named Christina Bennett.
Oh, okay.
Christina is a very vocal Black pro-life activist who is able to educate people and say, this is the history and this is what is still being done. And are we going to allow this to keep happening?
What do you think about that? That's a good question. Are we going to allow it to keep happening, or will it one day be a thing of the past? Because there are things that are called artificial wombs. These are things that people talk about. What do you think?
I believe that legalized abortion will someday be a thing of the past.
Same.
I do.
And what is the overall goal for you in this lifetime? To make it illegal again?
For me, it's much more than that. And I know it sounds very cliche when we say this,
but
I truly mean this from the depths of my soul. It is not just about it being illegal. It is about abortion being completely unthinkable. That we would dignity and value of every human being, that we would have resources and support out there for women, that they wouldn't think of it as an option, that they would be supported in their lives. My goal would be for it to be unthinkable, because then it doesn't need to be legal, illegal, any of those things.
Exactly. Have you seen the movie Demolition Man?
Is that an older movie?
It's with Sandra Bullock and Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes.
I probably saw it once. My husband's a movie guy at our house.
The reason I asked,
I'll be honest.
It's not off topic. The reason I asked, because in that movie they banned abortions. You have to have a license to be a parent. It's not like the main focus of the film. It's just something that they briefly mentioned in passing. But you have to have a license to be a parent. You're not allowed to have physical sexual contact. You need to do it through a lab or something. Anyway, I just thought it was funny because it's like abortion is illegal because it's like the year 3000 or something. Yeah.
Check that out.
Yeah, it's a silly movie. I love it. It's a good movie, but I just thought like it was somewhat relevant. No, this isn't a question to you, so never mind.
Well, but we kind of touched on that one already.
Yeah. Hang on, let's go down. There are no more questions. I actually really don't want to let you go. I want to keep talking to you, but
one of my kids is going to come in pretty soon. It's not going to be pretty.
Okay. No, I will let you go. I just have been really enjoying this discussion. But since people are fighting in the chats about other things and they're not really wanting to ask you questions, which is really shocking. I don't know if this is a question. Down syndrome children are commonly aborted, supposedly for their own sake. Yeah, that's true. Yet they are some of the happiest. I know they are. They are some of the happiest people on the planet. It's to make it easier for the mother, not for the sake of the child. Yeah, that's exactly right, Stephen. I knew a lady who said that when she got pregnant, she was going to have an abortion. She just said it like a normal thing. Oh, if I had been a Down syndrome person, I would have aborted it. And I looked at her and I said, why? And she goes, because it would have been inconvenient for me. And I'm like, okay, that's not about you. It's about the baby. Like, this is a woman I used to work with that said that. And I'm like, shit, it just it's just normal. It's a normal statement. It really is.
Well, an abortion is sold as being this compassionate thing to do.
Yeah.
If you are a loving, compassionate person, then you would abort a child with health issues or a disability.
Yeah. Very true. Hey, Valerie, does Melissa have any thoughts as to who is behind the huge push for pro-choice legislation? It's probably Obama. Who do you think it is?
Oh, I could make a million lists for this, but I don't have a problem calling out Amnesty International in particular. Because of everything that happened in Ireland. Amnesty International has targeted those nations who are pro-life in the hopes that they would be flipped to being a pro-choice country. And I am appalled as a woman that they continue to create these environments and essentially say that women need abortion, that this is a source of women's empowerment.
It's an essential.
Yeah, it is not essential. It is not empowerment. And what about my rights? And what about the rights of the other women who have survived abortions? What about the rights of women like my biological mother who are forced or coerced into abortions? Let's just have an honest conversation instead of that aggressive legislation being introduced and just rhetoric crammed down people's throats.
Do you think if you weren't the product of an attempted abortion, you would still be anti-abortion?
Oh, yeah.
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 I mean, I'm not, and I'm passionately against it. So.
Yeah, I just wouldn't have been this public about it, right? I think I would have led this safe, comfortable, normal life. I tried to do that initially in my life, and that's not where I'm supposed to be.
No, God's given you a voice, and He wants you to use it. Astro Girl wants to know how many churches speak about abortion. Mine does, as they should. And is it fear of offending women / survivors with compassion? Probably. Some churches are pussies.
Have you and I become best friends?
I'm happy to become your best friend. I want to hug you and just congratulate you on just living the wonderful life you're living. Do you want to answer your?
It's the same problem around the world that by and large, yes, there are churches who preach on abortion and talk about healing, but by and large, the church is silent. And yeah, it is. It's fear of hurting people, of bringing up what they know to be their past. I can't even remember the statistic off the top of my head, but the research would tell us that I think it was somewhere in the 40% range where women who have abortions identified a religious background and attending church on a regular basis. So
liberalism has infected the churches. That's what I hate.
Well, and when we see those kind of numbers, we need to recognize that women within the church are still having abortions. So not talking about it isn't helping the situation. So if pastors are afraid of offending people, they need to realize why they're there and know that we preach about all sorts of issues.
Yeah.
Right? To try to influence and impact people's lives. And we can do it in a manner that is respectful and compassionate and ultimately brings people to a place of healing. There is nothing else besides abortion that I feel like so many churches dance around.
Oh, yeah. No, my church is good about that kind of stuff. But I can't help but think of people like Joel Osteen and the guy from Hillsong. These are the liberal, pussies I was referring to. Like, they're afraid to say anything against homosexuality. They're afraid to say anything against abortion because they want to be liked. But you know, the Bible says that people like us will be hated. Doesn't matter how nice we are. We have enemies based on the fact that we speak the truth. It's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm going to read out maybe 3 more questions and then we're done. Because how many kids do you have, and what time, and when will they just come charging in your room?
My 12-year-old will sleep as long as she possibly can.
Oh, okay.
My 5-year-old is the one who will come in with her wild hair and her pajamas. I had told her this morning, if you wake up and you can't see me, you can either crawl into bed with Dad or wait until I open the door. And she said, yeah, I'll turn on the TV and just wait for you. We'll see what happens.
How cute. All right. I'm just going to try and put up a couple more questions and then we're done. How old were you when you got married?
Oh gosh, I have to think for a minute. So I sometimes forget how old I am. I'm 42 and it's okay.
No way. You look 36.
So my husband and I have been married. It'll be 15 years this year. So we got married when I was about 28, but I've known my husband since I was very young. We went to high school together. I had a horrible crush on him. He didn't know me. So I forget how long we've actually been together.
And how does he feel about like your activism and your story? Like, is he like super supportive and just loves that you're in it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We would not be in this place if he didn't support it. And honestly, the very first night we went out on a date, I told him everything. Even though we had known each other for a long time, he didn't know this part of the story. And so I told him, and I actually said to him that night, if I never hear from you again, I'll just know that you aren't cool with this. And because at the time I was not speaking publicly, but I said, I think someday maybe I'm supposed to do something with this. I don't know what's going to happen in my life. And, you know, made it clear, maybe we aren't supposed to be together. And here we are.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I'm so happy for you. I hope I find someone like that. My question was, I don't know if this is for you or if this is part of the fight that they're having in the comment section, but it was never looking for a baby to die to save a woman in labor. So why do we, she's rewording it because we were confused by it earlier. So why do we now need abortion to save mothers' lives? Exactly. Yeah. Strong point. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. But yeah.
And that's the part that that's the piece that I had talked about. So many doctors have made that clear. You don't need abortion to save the life of a mother. And why would you do that?
Have you seen, I forgot her name. She's a female comedian. And she's talking to this abortionist. He's a big black guy. And she's going, I had my first abortion in Seattle. Woo! Yeah. And then the crowd's like, I just want to like stab her. Not to death because pro-life. Like, my gosh, that made me
capital punishment again.
No. Just like, you know, stab her maybe here. just to the shoulder. No. But that big black guy, the abortionist guy, I forgot his name, but he was also interviewed by Jesse Lee Peterson. Do you know who that is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've had him on my channel too. And Jesse Lee Peterson was disgusted by the guy. Like he couldn't interview him the way he would interview anyone else because you could see that there was so much. He was indignant. Because how do you interview someone that says, "Oh, it's all about women's choice"? You know that farce is fake. And the abortionist is saying, "Oh, I'm a Christian," and then it's like, "You're not a Christian."
Yeah, I can't think of his name right now, but I know
you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That makes me angry, that story. But yeah. Look, everyone thinks you're beautiful. You are. All right. Let's keep going down. Any other questions? Yeah. I just hate that stuff. I just don't understand how society has gone so disgustingly bad that we praise the bad and punish the good. Like. I've made more than one video about that just as a general philosophy type of thing, but it's just disgusting. I'm really, really mad at the state of the world, and that's why I think you and I exist now. That's why you and I have these callings. My friend Benjamin, does Melissa know about the stats of abortions of boys versus girls? I have heard here in Australia there are a lot of selective abortions of girls, meaning girls are getting aborted or more boys are getting aborted. What do you mean, Benjamin? Anyway, either way, do you know about stuff?
I don't know of any of the statistics, but we do know that gender selection abortion is a real thing. And again, we want to pretend that maybe that only happens in certain parts of the world. But even in Canada, there was some research that came out in recent years where they were able to identify that the gender selection abortion is a very real situation that, again, we don't talk about.
No, we don't. That should be a thing that gets raised up more often for sure. People seem to think a woman having an abortion won't result. Okay, here we go. This is a relatively good. Dangerous Spaces wants to know. Well, lots more girls. Benjamin just texted. More girls. People want more girls get aborted. Women really strongly mourn a baby that was a miscarriage / stillborn. But for some reason, people seem to think a woman having an abortion won't result in the same sadness. Well, the thing is, though, Dangerous Spaces, that the woman is choosing to rid her body of that baby. She doesn't have to mourn it. She could just have it and then not mourn it. Do you have a comment on that, Melissa?
A couple comments. Even if that woman is, quote unquote, making that choice at the time, I can tell you through experience that over time, most women do report that mourning, that loss, that grief, that guilt that happens. Now, the problem that we face is that, again, when abortion has been so normalized in our society, what we find is that the voices of women who regret their abortion are silenced. And the research telling us that there is grief, that there is regret, is often, again, silenced and shut out by our culture. So there was a research study out of California that came out, I think about 2019, where they were trying to say, once again, that women don't regret their abortions. And if anybody saw that study, it was incredibly flawed. It was not a good study. And really, it was set up to, again, try to push that narrative that women don't regret their abortions. Why do they do that? Because they don't want that narrative that there is regret to get out there.
Yeah, that's very good. I love how you built on that. That was very, very specific. Port wants to know, is there an abortion industrial complex? I hear that dead babies are sold and used in vaccinations and research. So last week I had on my show a woman named Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. She's a very well-known anti-vaxxer, and she actually tweeted our interview today. But the point of my story, the point of that is that I discovered before interviewing her as well that dead babies from abortion clinics are used in our vaccinations. I have documentation proving it. I was supposed to forward it to a friend and I forgot, but I'm going to do it. Do you have a comment on that? Sorry, and you should probably answer Port's question as well. Yeah.
Well, that is a common practice that we know that the cells of aborted children are used in a lot of vaccinations. And so
we know that is a fact.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That research is out there. I don't think people would even contest that by and large at this point. So yeah, we know that it happens. I think the greater argument that I see is about the role of aborted body parts, baby body parts. And that, again, kind of came out of the United States in general. There was the group that went undercover. It was initially Live Action, and then David Daleiden and his crew went undercover to expose Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry for essentially the trafficking of baby body parts. And that's been tied up in the court for a very long time. It's continuing to play out. But if people see some of those videos from the Centers for Medical Progress, you can hear those abortionists or clinic workers talking about how much money certain body parts are. And so to think, right, I could have been harvested for my organs.
You could have. Oh, that's a horrible thought. Okay, I think that's it. Well, look, this person sort of encapsulates what I'm thinking. Thank you, Melissa, for being a true beacon. Thank you, Dia, for having a wonderful lady on your segment. I do appreciate you coming on. I know it's super early, but we're best friends now, according to you. So.
I'll see you in Australia.
Yes, please come, and then I can do a face-to-face interview with you, and I can introduce you to whatever it is you're going to do here for sure. I'm just gonna go all the way down and see if there's any. Yeah. Yeah. No, there's no real questions there. Oh, hang on. Okay, this was. I oppose capital punishment because the system is not perfect. Innocent people have been executed, but only found innocent after their deaths. What are your thoughts? Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah. Don't you think that if there's a rapist out there or a pedophile or a predator, that rather than like killing them in capital punishment, which sounds great to me at some capacity, but we could sterilize them, make them eunuchs or something, like, as a form of punishment. I know that sounds really, really horrible too, but like better than.
I believe in incarceration and attempting to
that yeah, but then there's like, the taxpayer dollars and then the economy and but I do believe
whole other video.
It is. I do. Yeah. I believe everyone deserves salvation in Christ, and I think that's where we could probably leave it, because everyone is capable of change, even, but it's not a human change. It's not, all right, I'm going to decide I'm no longer going to be attracted to children. It has to come from something above us, because we can't do that on our own for sure.
That's a good place to end. Agreed.
I think so. Yeah, everyone's really, really saying that you are a great guest. I really, really delighted in having you. I really, really did. And yeah, if you can hook me up with that friend of yours, that'd be great. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Sure.
It'll be fine. No. Well, I hope you share this, because I think this story needs to be told. You have a very, very important story to be told, and I didn't know that your story was more than just you and Gianna. So you're saying that you know over 350 people who are abortion survivors. That's insane.
You'll see more of us very soon.
I believe you. Sounds like you got something cooking.
Always do.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'll let you go. I'll let you do your mum duties, and I'll let you start your day.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you so much. You just got to leave studio. I'm just going to end the broadcast now. Bye, guys. End broadcast.